Welcome, everyone, to my new interview series that I am calling the Five Nuggets. I will ask five questions, and my guests will share their wisdom on each. And today we will be talking about fatherhood with a very special guest. Happy Father's Day to all, first of all. And I wanted to take on this topic of fatherhood as a spiritual journey, as a part of leadership, and to share the wisdom that he and I both have collected over the years. Some of you already know who this guy is: the man, the myth, the legend, the goat, my goat. That sounds weird. It's my husband, Brian Gottlieb. Welcome, darling.
Well, hi, honey. I can kind of see you. It's so interesting because we're in the same home right now, but we couldn't figure out how to both be on the same screen with microphones, and so we're doing this like across from each other. So it's pretty fun. So thank you, thank you,
Yeah,
thank
you
you.
know,
This is so cool.
the modern new technology, the modern life, right? Here we
That's right.
are.
That's right. Here we are.
I wanted to do this interview with Brian because he has so many nuggets of wisdom to share on this topic of fatherhood and how it relates to leadership. So, Brian, for those of you who do not know you, can you do a quick bio on yourself?
I am the lucky guy to be married to you, obviously. But also we're a merged family. We have six wonderful kids in our collection, shall we say. And look, it's just, we've been very fortunate to have a lifetime of happiness together.
He is a business owner, owned three businesses that started on a folding table with
Yeah.
$3,000.
Yeah, with $3,000 in cash in 2009, and then, it was just me and a folding table. But then, the business grew, and over time, when we ended up selling all the businesses in 2022, we were up to 600 employees and about $150 million dollars a year in annual revenue. It was quite the ride, and so it's been a fun journey. And today, I'm really focused on, every day, how do I make a positive impact in this world? And one way is through my new book that came out, Beyond the Hammer. That's been a fun run. And then obviously supporting anything that my lovely wife does because she's awesome.
So his book, Beyond the Hammer, is a Forbes bestseller, and it's up for some international awards. And it is a wonderful book for leadership, but I think also it is an incredible book about fatherhood. Let's dive into Nugget one when it comes to fatherhood, and let's talk about the BC phase of life. Now, BC, what I mean by that is before children. Can you, Brian, remember what you thought about fatherhood way back when and the perceptions and maybe aspirations you had about parenting before you were actually in it?
Well, I think it's not a matter of fatherhood by itself. I'd like to wrap it all up into the concept of family, right? What does it mean to have your own family? And you have these visions of this, like, the white picket fence and the little cute home with with maple trees. And then, of course, you get married and have kids. and, and reality
It
isn't always.
all goes to hell.
Yeah, but look, it's to me, and different people choose different paths. Fatherhood or motherhood isn't for everyone, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. For me, I'm a people person, and it'd be nice to have my own little people. So that's what kids are about. So I've always wanted to be a dad. So I'm grateful to be a dad of six today.
Well, I think one of the most interesting things about you in terms of this topic is that what's really important to me, since we're a blended family, is that your life included not only just a nuclear family of parents, but then it also included having step parents. How did that shape your views on fatherhood? And also, did it have any impact on how you perceived yourself as becoming a leader?
Everything has an impact on everything, right? I think whether it's
Oh,
a,
yeah.
a, a job we have and we work for great bosses and we work for rotten ones, and when we have a chance to step into leadership, maybe we do the things that we liked about the great bosses and we don't do the things we didn't like about the rotten bosses. And sometimes maybe we do the things we shouldn't be doing. But I think it's the same thing with our experience as we're growing up. We probably have a long list inside of our heads of, if I ever raise a kid, I'm definitely doing these things, and if I ever raise a kid, I'm never going to do that because I didn't like that. And then, of course,
Yeah.
we see how real that list is once you become a parent.
Yes, very, very true. Yeah, I mean, for me, the assumptions of having kids, I mean, I assumed I was going to have kids, But personally, I never really thought deeper than that. It's very unusual as a woman. I think people assume that we all sit around and daydream about having kids. I knew I'd wanted them, but I hadn't taken the time, and probably at that place in my life before I had kids, where I was actually maybe mature enough in my own personal development. I didn't have that framework. And I'm curious and wonder how many people before kids in their BC phase of life actually can process all of that.
I don't even know what I'm going to have for dinner tomorrow night. So to plan out that far, to really be so thoughtful as to, gee, I want kids, and but that in that is an opportunity though, right?
Yeah.
Because would it have been different had I planned it out a little better? And I think there's some things we could certainly talk about around that because I too didn't. I knew I wanted the concept of kids, but I didn't know what that really meant in full. And you don't know
Yeah.
until you start doing it.
Oh, for sure. So, nugget number one, my question to you: what advice would you give a man still in BC
Yeah.
phase of life?
Yeah. Well, I think if you're in the BC zone, shall we say, before kids, and you do want a family, I would say take a moment and write down the type of parent you want to be. Okay? Because once you
Yeah.
start having kids, things get crazy. But you can then use that as a litmus test to always inspect, are your actions as a parent aligning with the intentions that you want to be as a parent? And if you do that, everything's going to work out really well.
What a wonderful nugget of wisdom that honestly I think couples should do before they have kids. That
Yeah.
is so helpful. Nugget number two:
Sure.
let's talk about when you finally were a father for the first time. Like, how shocking was that?
The oldest boy, Corey, came home from the hospital and he's in my arms and he's got hiccups and he's hiccuping. And I didn't know what to do. So I'm like on the phone with the emergency room. What do I do? My kid's got hiccups and it's hiccups. It's okay. So, it's so interesting because, you don't know what you don't know, but yet you all of a sudden feel so very responsible for this child. In fact, I remember the slowest I ever drove in my life was when the first time my child was in the car bringing him home from the hospital. I'm like, I've got my radar on, my head is on a swivel.
Oh, oh gosh. Yeah. And I guess that's the stuff that you just can't even prepare for.
Yeah,
The feeling of responsibility
yeah,
of another life. Yeah, I think it strikes all new parents. So let's talk about some of the challenges of that phase of life. There's a think tank out there by the name of New America. They did some research and cited the top 5 challenges that fathers face. And one of the most difficult one is the work-life balance. Like
yeah,
18% of the men
yeah,
polled said that their careers become this real challenge for them
yeah.
as they enter in this new phase of life.
It is true because you have so many competing priorities. And look, let's face it. And if you are a young parent and you're like trying to save money, it's like, well, you probably can't save money when you have kids, and you just got to be
Um,
at peace with all that because, but also you have to provide, right? But
yeah,
you're right. There's always these competing priorities. But I think even the concept of balance is probably not the right word I would choose because balance is like a scale, and then there's only one place where it's perfectly balanced. It's never Things are never balanced. So it's really
never
about, to
balanced.
me, it's about being present, I think, is more important, right? Because
Mm,
when we're with our kids, we're with our kids. When I'm with my wife, I'm with my wife. When and I think it's true even with employees. When you're having a one-on-one coaching session with someone, is your phone on or is it off? And are we able to be present? And as a young parent, that's very, very difficult, and yet it's still something we should aspire for.
yeah. Yeah, there's another aspect to that too about being present, and that is your mental health. I think you hit on it where, there's so many changes going on in life, the lack of sleep, the feelings of inadequacy. Newborns are really bad at saying, "Good job, Dad. You rocked me to sleep great last
Yeah,
night,"
yeah,
and this idea that you just have to you have to continue to pour unconditional love into this little alien being who sometimes you feel is like an enemy of yours.
that's right.
And it's a lot. And I think also, the idea that the relationship of the two parents is dynamically changing. and sometimes derailing in this process of trying to figure out how to take on this new role, especially when, as young parents, I think we're still growing and healing and trying to figure out who the hell we are as professionals, as a couple, as a parent.
But then the moment you introduce a child, there's this whole other dynamic that takes place. And as we both like to recommend, first start with a puppy and then go from there. It's an interesting dynamic that enters into everything. And I think the more aligned a couple is around how to deal with certain things, the better the outcome.
For me as a mom, I carried that baby, for my biological kids. And there's this automatic connection that you feel. But for dads, it truly is kind of like this, all of a sudden this alien is here in your relationship, in between your relationship and in your care. And this idea of how do you develop that bonding with a child?
I think one of the super important things is it's important to nurture the child, but it's also important to nurture the relationship that you have with your other half along the process. And I'll give you an example. Any young parent can relate to the day when you're like after a long day's work, you're out, you're busting your chops all day long, and you go home and you finally get to sleep, and then 1 o'clock in the morning, and the baby starts crying. And your eye is half open, and you're like waiting to see, is my wife going to get up and deal with this baby, or do I have to?
Yeah.
And you know what?
Yeah.
And the thing is that we can easily in our own mind justify all the reasons why we have the right to stay in bed, and the other person should be the one that gets up. And that's all
Yeah.
a bunch of nonsense. And I think
Yeah.
you have to be a co-producer in raising the child, and recognize that the more you can say, I'm just going to assume that my wife had a very difficult day just like I did, and I'm going to get up and I'm going to take care of that kid, because ultimately I love the child, and it's not about anything else other than that.
One of the reasons why I absolutely love having conversations and love being married to you, because you have that attitude. And I was just going to mention, there's a book out right now. The title is How Not to Hate Your Husband After Having Kids. And it's a really good, honest look into the struggles of co-parenting with a man. And I think it is so important for men to understand that your your role isn't just as provider. We desire all the facets of who you are in our lives, being present and not just falling back on that idea of, hey, I'm providing, so therefore they don't need anything else from me. And I think the most important and loving thing is, yeah, yes, we do. We need all of you. Like we want all of you, not just what you're providing. And that is like a kind and encouragement I would give to any young men watching this, is that you're not just a bank account. You're so much more.
Yeah, and by the way, that was one of our children calling us, by the way, if you didn't hear the phone
Oh,
ringing. Pretty funny. I just hung up on him. You can when they get older, you can do that kind of stuff. It's okay. Sorry,
yeah,
kid, we're on a Zoom right now.
yeah. Oh gosh.
When we think about being a provider, right? When we think provider, it's not just about money, right? It's about
Yeah.
emotional support. It's about
Yes.
all those sorts of things. It's about being a provider of consistency.
Okay, so nugget number 2. What is the one thing you wish you could go back to your younger self and tell him?
In the early days of parenting, right? That
Mhm,
my time with my child is a better
mhm.
gift than anything they could ever find under a Christmas tree. And I just need to remember that, and always need to remember that.
Very well said. Okay, nugget 3. Let's move on to the next phase of both of our lives, when we were single parents,
Yeah.
and the added pressure of being the sole source of everything for your
Yep.
kids during
Yep.
that phase. It's a huge lesson, um, challenge of learning how to balance and prioritize, work, parenting, and also dating, right?
Definitely a challenge. Yep. Oh, you don't just bring your kids on every date? What do you do? No. Oh,
Well, I
yeah.
think one of the interesting stories is, you were raising your kids in a very large metropolitan area, and you were the single parent. Like,
Yep.
you did it all. I remember you telling stories about how you would work all day long. Sometimes have to work late, right? We all do when we're chasing our careers, but then you would have to travel on these very congested highways trying to get to the daycare center, which is what was it, like $10 every minute? It was some
It's ridiculous.
horrible, expensive
Yeah, yeah, if you were
fine for
late,
being
oh
late.
boy. And it's not
And
just
you
that,
just
it's like it's like, "Oh, I'm a bad parent because 'cause I'm 10 minutes late, sorry."
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things I experienced too about being a single parent is the feeling that you are never doing anything awesome. You're doing everything as good as you can. But I think that it was a great lesson for me. And there's a man named Tom uh, Piccarelli, and he has a Instagram account called the Dad Vibes. So it's the uh, period dad period vibes. And he said something very insightful on there. He said parenting is all about progress, not perfection. And I think that is one of the things that was a soulful thing I learned being a single parent is there is no such thing as perfection.
I'd also like to add to that, that being a single dad, people are like, "Oh, wow, you're a single dad." But there are a gazillion single moms out there too, and we all go through the same exact struggles. It's not like a single dad is, more special than a single mom. It's challenging, and you're right. It's imperfect, but on the flip side of it is that I do believe that we develop a very special and different type of bond with our children because of that time we had with them, and I think they learn things that they might not possibly learn in a regular environment. When I say regular, I don't know what that means, but if it was like, husband and wife raising the kids every single day, which again, going back to that whole picket fence concept, would your children, which are, by the way, now my children too, learn from you is that my mom is a winner. My mom is driven. My mom gets stuff done. My mom is disciplined. My mom is focused on stuff. My mom is entrepreneurial. There's a whole long list of things that your children learn from you watching them. My mom is superwoman, that they learn from you, seeing how you navigated things. We remember our shortcomings. Our kids don't. We're still there in many ways, their hero. And that's why I think
Oh,
single
that's a
parents should
good
give
argument.
themselves a break there.
Well, and the thing I talk about in my upcoming book, Via Wonderment, is this idea of authenticity. And I think it's really important to teach kids that it's okay to be human. And being human does not include perfection. And actually, to the counter is when parents try to pretend to be perfect or are unwilling to admit when they're wrong or try to present this facade that everything's perfect, child, everything's good. That wasn't dad and I yelling in the background before. No, no, no. When we do that, we are teaching our kids to be unauthentic. And we are also teaching them that they cannot trust the truth of what they're seeing. And I think,
Right.
if anything, kids see, and like you're saying, they grow and they develop based on the truth of what they're experiencing. And the more you can be honest with them about life, and if you're a single parent, you're struggling through prioritizing all these things, I think it's really okay that you just do the best you can. And like you said, your kids see the truth of it.
Yeah.
They really do.
As I write about in my book, Beyond the Hammer, look, leaders are aware of the echo of their voice. It's one of the pillars of Beyond the Hammer in the leadership book. And I think that, we have to realize that in everything we do, even as a parent, we send some sort of an echo, and the echo of our actions, the echo of our attitude, the echo of all these sort of things. And that's what they really learn off of, I think. They really learn off of because in many ways, we model the way for our children. And I don't know how to be perfect, so I don't know how to raise a perfect child. I do, however, believe that it is about raising authentic kids, and it's and the ultimate goal is it. Do I want all of our children to be successful? Of course I do, but what I really want them to be is decent. And how do we just raise decency, and how do we focus on decency?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting in your book, George, the main character, is really struggling with, he's taking on his grandfather and his father's business, and he's experiencing failure in that process, and his key employees are jumping ship. And at the same time, he was a single parent and he's struggling with his daughter. One of the most poignant things about your book is that it showcases the holistic importance that with your child or your children and how that interacts, right? It's all woven together. We are not one or the other. We're just everything. You can't just be a singular, well, I'm successful at business, therefore I'm done. I'm doing my part as a man. But that there is this holistic experience of also just being a human and a father as a leader, and the importance of understanding that it all connects.
It all does. It all connects. It's
Mhm.
all one. It's both
Yeah.
end. It's not either or.
Yes. One of my favorite quotes of Brian Gottlieb. It's not either or, it's and. I think
Okay.
one of the toughest lessons in single parenting, at least for me, was you're struggling with this whole ex situation, but you're also dealing with society's like side eye. You're divorced. Yeah. Like, there's this weird thing. And it really taught me humility. There's humiliation in that process, right? You kind of feel like a failure. But the flip side of that, which I really want to share with those maybe going into this phase of life, is that there was freedom. And what I mean by freedom is I didn't have to pretend to be perfect anymore. I could be me, flaws and all. And in that freedom, I felt it was life-changing. Prior, when you are struggling in marriage or in a business or whatever we might be connecting this to, there was a separation. I felt like separate from who I was and my core, like my soul. And I didn't quite know what my purpose was as a result, because I was just so disconnected from the me. And I think it was during those years of single parenthood that I, for the first time, felt a reckoning. Like I finally met me, my true self, during that phase. And when I could finally be who I was a very interesting time of coincidence that when you and I met, it was a divine timing. Do you feel the same?
It's a really, really big question, right? Because there's
Yeah.
so much that goes into the emotional process when what you thought your family was going to be like before you get married and before you have kids turns out to be very, very different once you become a single parent, right?
Yeah.
And look, we could drive ourselves crazy worrying about what other people think about us, okay? And there's absolutely not a whole lot that can be gained out of it, right? So, ultimately, we both know people that are married and miserable and raising a kid just because they want to get the kid through the house and not, and is that the right relationship you want to model for somebody? Again, who am I it's not my place to cast judgment. My place is how do I love people? How do I support people? How do I understand? It's not my place. Where they're at is where they're at. And the best
Yeah.
I could be is there for them if they need it.
Yeah. So let's get into Nugget 3. What helped you through those years, and what did it teach you about parenthood, but also about like business leadership?
What those years taught me was resiliency. I had to be at peace with the idea that purpose changes. Sometimes our purpose is just getting through today. Sometimes our purpose in the early days of business is just staying in business. My purpose is how do I stay in business for another day? Understanding that our purpose changes and being at peace with that. And we don't have to always have everything figured out. Sometimes just figuring out this week is enough.
Yeah. Okay, and I have a follow-up question. How did the experience of single parenthood help you understand women better?
Mm. I don't know that it was a matter of understanding them better, more about empathizing. It's the pre-kids. If somebody had a couple of kids in a stroller and they were screaming in a supermarket and acting up, I could be very judgmental on that. But as I've gotten older, I
Me
can say,
too.
"Oh my gosh, I remember those days." So I think that's some of the biggest change. How about that?
Yeah, and not only, oh, I remember those days, there's also like a sigh of relief going, oh, thank God that's not me trying to make that kid be quiet.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say one other thing. If you're a single parent, you're entering the dating world, be proud. You're a package, okay? You come as a package. It's not just you, and then there are the kids. You come as a package, and we all come as a package, and and your package is perfect just the way it is. And there's somebody out there for you that will love you and your package. Is that inappropriate? But
Yeah, your
you know
package
what
is
I mean?
perfect, darling. Actually, what's funny about that is that was one of those personal growth development things that I used when I went from being sad and desperate as a single parent to, I think, taking on my own uh, persona and becoming more confident right before I met you. I was sick and tired of men looking at me going, oh, like you have 3 kids. Yeah. And I just thought, damn it, I am going to wait until I meet a man who's smart enough to understand that this is a plus, not a negative,
Correct.
that I
Correct.
have these beautiful, amazing
Oh,
humans
yeah.
alongside. Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Okay, let's get into nugget 4. And this is kind of a juicy one about the, blending families and
Yeah.
stepfatherhood. When you and I started dating, what did you think about taking on 3 more kids?
Uh, the one thing, and you know this, I was doing math. Okay, your youngest at the time was,
Yeah, yeah,
this big, and therefore by the time they're out of the house, I'm going to be how old and all that. But look, it's just, by the way, there's nothing wrong with going through that process too, by the way. There's nothing
right.
wrong with being
Yeah.
thoughtful because you don't want to get into something and realize that, oh boy, I wish I wasn't in it. So you just got to go into it
Mhm.
with open eyes. But your children are wonderful.
I
And
know. Yeah.
and
As is yours.
they're good souls, and I
Yeah.
think one of the smart things we did early on is once we realized we were going to stay together and we were going to build a life together, and while the kids were still living under each other's roofs, we merged families and made sure that they at least had an opportunity to all live together under the same roof. So before
Yeah.
they went off, because they were getting older, and then before they went off and did their own thing and moved out
Yeah.
or went to
Yeah.
college, and I think that was an important step in all of it because look, blending
Mhm.
families it takes time, it takes patience, it's a commitment. I suppose if we were to ask the kids and they were to be brutally honest, probably they're thinking somewhere in the back of their head, is this person really going to be sticking around forever? Can I get emotionally involved? Can I go all in emotionally on it? Or is this something temporary and I have to stay guarded? And
Yeah, yes. When we get married, we're like, okay, we're going to be married, and like in our marriage vows, we said we are better together than we are apart. Well, that's fine and dandy, but then you say to these kids, okay, kids, we are now a family, and it's like we got to have compassion that they're like, A, I did not pick this, and B, I don't. My life was kind of torn apart when I was young, and this divorce and all this. Now you're expecting me to trust this
right.
new adult. And we have to understand that that takes so much time. It's a healing process for these young souls who didn't ask for this. But now, how are they going to get to a place where they can truly let you in, allow you to be inside their heart?
If I could share with you that when it comes to how to be most effective, in my opinion, and maybe this will be the nugget and I'll repeat it in a moment, but it's that slow is fast and fast is slow, right? If you try to build a relationship too quickly, it's going to take a lot longer because it's going to feel not authentic. I think you have to
Yeah.
have patience. You have to go at the kids' pace, not at your pace. You really have to be sensitive and really empathetic to their journey and meet them where they are at any given moment and really look for ways to connect. Now, not all ways are good ways to connect. When I first met your kids, I
I
go
know what
over.
you're going to talk about.
Oh, it's a great story. It's
Go
crazy.
for it.
So,
Good.
I
Yeah.
raised boys, right? We're like, we're building go-karts and we're doing boy stuff, and our house might smell like laundry all the time, and that's okay. I finally get a chance to meet my wife's kids, and they're sitting, and 2 girls and a boy, and one of the daughters, Samantha, is sitting on the couch playing with her dolls, and I go over to
American
try to
Girl dolls.
play with, yeah, little girl dolls. So I go over and I pick up the dolls and I start doing like karate chops with them. Hiya, cha cha. And she starts like looking at me like I'm a maniac. Those are her babies. And I'm thinking, well, no, they're action figures. So I think it's also that when it comes to parenting is understanding that slow is fast and fast is slow.
Yes, and I think, one of the most beautiful things is is through the years watching you become a girl dad,
Yeah.
and you've
It's
done a fantastic job of it. But I think it was Diane Sawyer. She was a news person and in a blended family, and she mentioned that it takes about a decade for a blended family to feel like real family, because you got to have shared memories and all these things that we're talking about. And that, I think, held true in our experience. We were very fortunate that the kids initially, like, there wasn't a lot of conflict or anything like that. But my heart just would swell when you would see the kids starting to interact with each other, spend time
Yeah,
not with
for
us,
sure.
but with each other,
Yeah.
which is like, and I call it the puppy like a litter of puppies analogy. Like, if you watch a litter of puppies, and we have 6 kids, so it's kind of appropriate. But when you see a litter of puppies, they're rolling around, they're fighting, they're play growling, they are learning who they are within the pack. They're learning hierarchy, they're learning dominance, submission, and the mom dog is right there. And if any of them start acting out, she corrects them, saying, okay, no, that's not how you are in a pack. And I feel the same is somewhat true when you have a large family, like a blended family. When I would watch and witness the kids kind of roasting each other a little bit, and even in the moments when they were kind of like, who are you, and how, and I want to love you, and I want you to love me, and how is this working? All of that was so important to the bonding process. And I think as step parents, and even maybe some nuclear families, you think, oh, no, 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 the family needs to be perfect. Everyone needs to love each other perfectly all the time. And the truth is, they must work through that stuff to develop genuine love and bonding.
Yeah.
You have to go through that process.
Yeah. Do they love each other because of their similarities or despite their differences? And
Yeah.
a true family, they love each other despite their differences as individuals. That's the
Hmm.
whole point of authenticity, is that I can
Yes.
love you despite our differences. So you can
Correct.
always be
Yeah.
your true self. If it's only
Yeah.
because of your similarities, people present just a portion of themselves. So I think, that's
Yeah.
also equally important.
One of the principles of law of attraction, and it's the 5th principle in my book, which is harmony. And as step parents, I think it's really important for us to maintain a steady inner harmony despite life's topsy-turvy events. I think this is important for parents in general. But as step parents, as you're kind of auditioning for this role of a very important key figure in your stepkids' lives, learning that your leadership and parenting, it requires a steadiness and consistency. And it may take consistency through years of experiences so that that stepchild can say, okay, I know who this person is. I know I can trust him, and I can open my heart to them because I know their intentions are in the right place.
Yeah.
And I think it was really interesting for me as a stepmom. The way I show my love, and I think my stepkids know this about me, is through worry. So I might say, make sure you bring a coat because it's going to get cold. It's going to get cold tonight, and you're going to be freezing if you don't have a coat. And I think at first they might have thought, why does she think I'm so stupid? I'm not going to bring a coat. Now they know if I'm worrying about them, that means I love them. That wasn't something that came natural, right? It's as we learn who we are and they learn who we are as the parents, um, then they could start to relate to us better. And I think it also applies in leadership. In your book, as George stepped up to the challenges of defining what his mission was, and then his employees could start to trust that that was indeed the truth so that they could base their livelihoods on
Right.
his leadership.
It all ties together. And if you think about, like a business has a culture, and what is a business culture? It's a shared set of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors inside of the organization, right? But a family has a culture too, right? How do the kids think about being part of that family? Because how people think, and I know you get into this quite a bit with your think feel in your book, which is, by the way, fantastic. And I had a sneak peek to the audio version of it. I just love it. I've already read it, but then hearing the audio
So
version
much
is perfect.
fun.
How people think affects how they feel, and how people feel affects how they behave. And how do we want our kids, each of us, to think about our family, right? Because it does affect the culture, how we feel and how we behave, both with each other, and how do we feel about ourselves as well.
It was a very poignant moment for me is when I had a business that was acquired in 2014, and we were already together, but it was the first time in my entire life that I wasn't working. And you said, hey, I got you. It's okay. Like, take some time off. And I remember that first year, I had to learn to trust that you as my man in my life, you were going to be there for me. Like, I could let go of that thing that I had always had, but which has also always been a struggle because I wanted to be home caring for my family. It was then that I realized that our relationship is about interdependence, right? This is you and this is me, and we can lean on each other, and we know that one of us isn't going to leave the other one. That was when I realized I had already been with you for almost 10 years at that point, but I was just going through that. I realized kids go through that same thing, like to have compassion for them as they're processing through that whole thing. But it also ties to leadership. Your employees have to know you are there for them and they can rely on your leadership.
It all ties together. It's one and the same.
Let's get into this nugget 4. My question to you is, how has fatherhood shaped you now that you've actually been a father for over half of your life?
It's taught me that there's a big difference between being right and being influential. We could be right all day long. We try to work with our children. We could be right, but it doesn't mean they're going to learn anything. We have to be influential with them. And it's true with people too. When I have people in my business and I'm trying to model the business as a training organization or have them treat a customer a certain way, we could be right all day long, but we're not going to grow until we're influential with people. And that very much holds true with children.
Yeah, sure does. And I want a follow-up question to that is, spiritually, how has being a stepfather and in a blended family, how has it impacted your self-identity and your personal development? And maybe you just answered that. Do you have any additional soulful uh, bits of wisdom you'd share?
I'm just the luckiest guy in the world. How about that? I am the absolute luckiest guy in the world. And I pinch myself every day and I express my gratitude every day for the love that's in my life. And, that alone is quite a spiritual journey.
Well, I pinch you every day too. Okay, so let's get into this final nugget of wisdom, nugget 5, legacy.
Mm.
Looking back, I think we both would agree that life was unpredictable, it's imperfect, it's messy, but it is also painfully beautiful and joyful in its authentic expression. And love is the thread that weaves us together. You and me, our kids, our friends, our mentors, our mentees, our colleagues, and even those from our people from our past. We are all connected in this golden thread of life and soul's purpose. Love is that thing, that unconditional, infinite expression of, I guess, good intentions. It's not just the lovey-dovey stuff, even though that's like super important, but it's the nitty-gritty, the consistent, unwavering desire, another philosophy from my book. What that means is to have a consistency that something is more than just me. It's that we want to be a we, right? And in our wedding vows, to be better together than we are apart. And through it all, what have you learned is most important to you? And how have you shifted or shaped your life based on that? And what impact did that have on your soul?
We can get really hung up on the future, but ultimately, our legacy, our future, our happiness, it's all going to be determined. It's a bunch of moments all strung together over a long period of time, and that's what it is. And I think to me, how can I be the best human being I can be in this moment? Or how can I be the most present for my wife or for my child in this moment? Am I perfect at it? Of course I'm not perfect at it. But I also know that by stringing moments together over time, we get better at it. What we practice, we become excellent at. If I choose to practice negativity and anger, boy, oh boy, I'm going to be negative and angry in the most happiest situations because I'm an expert at it. But you know what? If I practice patience, if I practice listening, if I practice understanding, if I practice joy, if I practice gratitude, I will be a joyful and grateful person, even in the most challenging times. And for me, if I can bring that to a challenging situation, you know what? That's probably going to be good for everybody. So I don't worry as much about what will my legacy be. I focus more on what should this moment today be. And the legacy, it'll take care of itself.
Well, now we didn't even get into the final nugget of wisdom. What do you want your legacy to be?
It's that one day we have a grandchild named Emmett, okay? And he's 5 years old. And to me, the ultimate legacy would be that one day a stranger walks up to my grandson and says, "You know what? Your dad made a positive impact in my life. If I can do that, that's a heck of a legacy." Now, I do suggest, by the way, I was listening to Kat recording her audiobook, and it is terrific. You've got to listen to it. I can't wait to get it. I'm going to play it all the time. But hold on. She's walking in my office right here, and she's got flowers. Aw,
Happy Father's Day,
thank you,
darling.
Sweetie Pie. Love you.
Love you too.
I, my friends, am the luckiest guy in the world.